All right, RezaieStrong followers. So salt gets a totally bad rap. And I put out a poll asking if you consume salt in normal amounts and you have normal kidney function, can that cause hypertension? Because you hear about people always talking about lowering salt intake. And this got stemmed from a video that got sent my way by one of my friends. And so I'm going to play the video first. It's not very long. It's about a minute. And then I'm going to give you my thoughts on what this physician is saying.
80% of people with normal blood pressure are not salt sensitive. 75% of people with pre-hypertension are not salt sensitive, meaning a normal salt intake won't significantly increase their blood pressure. And even hypertensive patients, only about 45 to 50% of them are salt sensitive. So it's really a small percentage of people that are salt sensitive. And then even in those individuals, it's actually more important to figure out what's causing them to retain salt and fluid, because a normal kidney will excrete even up to 100 grams of salt per day. And typically what it comes down to is over-consuming refined carbs and sugars, or not eating enough magnesium or potassium. And when people who are salt sensitive fix those things, usually their salt sensitivity goes away.
So I have to say, I agree with most of what this guy had to say. I actually don't know who this physician is, but I think most of his points are pretty spot on. But there's four little things, little tweaks I would like to make to what he said to be complete. So the first thing is that it is true that when you consume salt, fluid follows salt. And there are studies out there that have looked at, in normal kidneys, how much salt do we excrete in a 24-hour period? And on average, that is about 3 to 3.5 grams per day. I think in his video, he said 100 grams per day. Now, it is true that the kidneys are adaptable. And if you put more pressure on them, as in the form of more salt intake, they can get rid of more salt and therefore fluid. However, over the long haul, that will start causing problems with the kidney. So that's not a good strategy. So yes, true. Salt intake in normal amounts in normal kidneys, you will excrete salt up to 3 to 3.5 grams per day, and typically fluids follow where the salt goes. So that's point number one. So point number two, and I think this is a really important one, because the video makes this assumption that the amount of salt that a person is taking in is less than what the kidneys can actually handle. And the American Heart Association recommends about 2.3 grams of salt per day. Ideally, they would like less than 1.5 grams per day. And so what do these grams actually mean in something that we can wrap our brains around? And that is that 4 to 6 grams of salt is equal to about a teaspoon. Think about that. 4 to 6 grams of salt is about 1 teaspoon. And the American Heart Association is recommending ideally less than 1.5 grams per day. In other words, less than a third of a teaspoon. I would argue that most Americans and most people are consuming way more than a teaspoon of salt per day. And so therefore, if you're overloading the kidney, then you're going to hold on to salt because you can't get rid of all of it. And I already told you fluid follows where the salt goes. And so that increase in volume could potentially increase blood pressure in the way most people consume salt. The third point I want to make is that, again, we're assuming normal kidney function. Now, this video is not true in patients who already have kidney disease, because if your kidneys aren't working at 100%, then they may have limited salt excretion, which means that you're overloading them and they can't get rid of all the salt that you're taking in, and therefore fluid remains in the system and could potentially cause hypertension. So this video is not completely true in patients who have kidney disease. And then the last point that I actually agree with, 100% agree with, and this was the biggest point that I agreed with, is that we like to blame everything on salt for causing high blood pressure, but we don't think about all the other stuff we consume in mass quantities, like refined carbohydrates, bread, pasta, rice, all of which are pro-inflammatory to the body. Carbs equal a stressor to the body and can alter the gut microbiome, which more and more research is coming out showing that this pro-inflammatory state and alteration of the gut microbiome both will drive up blood pressure. And although we should probably try and reduce the amount of salt we take on a daily basis because it's just a healthy thing to do, it's probably not the salt in and of itself that's causing the high blood pressure and all the other stuff that we're eating that is actually causing the stressful state that is driving blood pressure up. In the end, salt consumed in normal amounts in normal functioning kidneys gets a totally bad rap. In reality, it's all the other garbage that we all eat and consume in mass quantities that actually drives our blood pressure up. So in the end, I do agree with most of what this guy had to say in his video. Let me know your thoughts, comments, and questions. Until next time.